Hello, Internet world, and welcome to another episode of Whatever Flips Your Waffle on 365sportscast.com. I'm your host, Mark Domeyer, coming to you from the bunker deep in the frozen heart of southern Minnesota. And yet again, we don't have a hot stove league to talk about for Major League Baseball to keep us warm. I'm glad you've decided to tune in, listen to my ramblings about Minnesota sports this week. Welcome again to those of you who have tuned in previous weeks. And again, welcome to those who might be checking things out for the first time. Speaking of the Hot Stove League, let's start this week's broadcast by talking about the state of Major League Baseball. Both sides are still no closer to any sort of a deal, that being the owners of the Major League Baseball teams and the Players Association. However, this week, Commissioner Rob Manfred came out and talked about two things that they believe will happen this year whenever the season actually starts. The first is a universal designated hitter. That means the National League will no longer have pitchers out there batting. You won't have to worry about different rules in interleague play and come World Series time and everything like that. So what does that mean? Well, that means that all these guys, I think back to Jim Thome when he was with the Twins, and really Jim Thome was an American League guy because to be on a National League team, even though he went to the Phillies after he left Minnesota, was a difficult thing. All he could really do was pinch hit. He couldn't play the field anymore. You think of a Nelson Cruz, that opens things up for him. It seems to lessen the chances he might come back to the Twins, although that seemed somewhat doubtful anyway. But now he can go to any team. He can go to any team in either league and have a designated hitter role, and that's where Nelson Cruz prolongs his career. And that ultimately is, the Players Association will certainly be on board with this, and it prolongs the careers of all these players, gives them a chance for more earnings, and that's part of the job of the union to make sure that their members can do that. I'll be honest, back in the day, and it really wasn't that long ago, I was really not in favor of a universal designated hitter. There's something about the strategy when it comes to National League play that always appealed to me. Do you pull your pitcher while he's pitching well and still has some innings left in him in order to try to get an opportunity to score a run in a particular situation? That was always, to me, just fascinating. What is the manager going to do? What guys do you have on your bench? How do you flip-flop things? The double switch, all those. Again, old school baseball guy here. I always thought that was really cool to see how that would work and what those managers would do in those situations. But the reality of the world today is that these baseball players are so specialized. And again, if you think about this, even if you're this great major league pitcher, at one point in your life, you probably were one of the better hitters on your high school baseball team or whatever like that. You could hit the baseball. That wasn't an issue. These guys were athletes. But the specialization that comes in to work on their arms and their arms and their arms, and they don't really go and hit much, got to be an embarrassment. Sure, you have some guys who can hit the ball a little bit, and if a pitcher hit a home run, that was a pretty big deal on SportsCenter. But the reality is they don't even work on bunting that well anymore. So to lay down a bunt became a precarious proposition at any point in time. So probably this has been high time that this should come along, and we should have that universal DH. The other part was it seemed to give a little bit of an unfair advantage to the National League teams when an American League team would visit their stadium. The American League pitchers hadn't really had time to work on bunting or swinging a bat or running bases or anything like that, whereas the National League pitchers make that just a regular part of how they prepare. Not as big a deal in the regular season, but boy, come the World Series, there's something to that. And if you're a manager who hadn't really had to worry about those kinds of things, suddenly you've got to be thinking about those. And again, there's a little advantage when you do it all the time compared to just a few times a year. So probably a really good thing that they're going to do this at last. A lot would say it's long overdue, keeping those leagues separate with different rules. Of course, those of us who've been watching baseball for some time remember when even the umpires were separated by leagues. You had National League umpires, you had American League umpires, and never the twain shall meet until you got to the World Series. And there was differences in strike zones, as there always are with umpires, but there was a distinct difference between the National League and the American League style of umpiring. And so, even that has come together, and they're just umpires, and now they will just be designated hitters And again, probably a great thing to see. We've talked about this in this program before when Ted Schwartzler was on here, and he talked about the fact that he thinks the Twins probably won't have a regular designated hitter this year, that they're just going to kind of rotate some guys through. You might have Miguel Sano there for a while, and you might put a Josh Donaldson there for a while. And part of that deals with keeping them healthy. They're not playing in the field, just batting 3-4 times a game, and helps their health a little bit long term. So designated hitter looks like it is here to stay. The National League will adopt it. And again, as if things aren't going to be crazy enough, whenever both sides come together, now that throws another mix in there where these free agents who might be much more aligned with just being a designated hitter have all the teams they can negotiate with and realistically go to. Although we know that the big names probably end up in some of the same places. Yankee Stadium, Dodger Stadium, those sorts of places, unfortunately. On the other end of that spectrum, we talk about the haves, the constant haves. The have-nots were mentioned as well by Rob Manfred, and that is the idea of a draft lottery that he wants to put into place, similar to what the NBA does, where you don't just go strictly on records. You have, I suppose, like the NBA, the teams that do not make the playoffs get thrown into a big barrel. They have so many ping pong balls, or however the Major League Baseball might want to do it. And the worse your record, the more ping pong balls you have. But there's going to be a little bit of randomness to that, and a little bit of chance that even if you were the team that just missed out on making the playoffs, you too could end up with the number one pick overall. The idea behind this is to avoid the tanking that they think some teams might be doing. Some teams go into this rebuild and they want to get, these high draft picks and better opportunities. But to me, I don't feel that super strong about this, but boy, the Major League Baseball draft doesn't seem to be as big a thing and as sure a thing every single year as something like the NBA draft is. The NBA draft, you usually count on these first few guys to be the real deal, sure thing. They're going to make a difference in your team. Well, Major League Baseball, you're years away from these people making an impact on your team. Now, the very, very best, you're just a year or two away. Joe Mauer didn't spend a whole lot of time in the minor leagues. But, Byron Buxton is in the same sort of a boat. But a lot of these guys don't. And to figure out if they're going to actually make it, first they have to sign with your team. Some of these guys go back to college. They decide, I don't want to play for that team. There's all kinds of things, and I think they'll make some adjustments to that as well. But the idea of a lottery certainly, I think, is more about the intrigue that it will bring. A lot of people like to watch the NBA draft lottery just for the anticipation, what's going to happen, who's going to end up with that number one pick. That's a pretty big deal. And so I think Major League Baseball, which has started broadcasting their draft recently, now will have that, chance to bring in more viewership. That means more money, of course, when you do that on the big networks. And that draws more attention to their draft, which not a lot of people really pay attention to, not like the NBA draft, not like the NFL draft, not like the NHL draft. All these things that the people who really love those sports watch, their diehards. I mean, the NFL draft is 3 days long, and some people tune in for almost the whole thing, if not the entire broadcast from start to finish. Major League Baseball draft, not as big a deal. So this to me is more about bringing eyeballs to a screen than it is about tanking. You still, if you are in a rebuilding mode, you're going to give a lot of young guys an opportunity to play. At the end of the season, maybe it makes a little bit more of a difference, or I don't know. I think back to an NBA game many years ago that I watched the Timberwolves. If they lost the game, they would have a little bit better chance with the ping pong balls. And they had guys jacking up threes from all over the place that don't normally shoot threes. It was an embarrassment to the game. I felt bad for the people who paid money to watch that game. Baseball is a little bit different. You're still going out there trying to battle. You're not going to intentionally try to lose a game, I don't think. I suppose a manager might put some different players in positions than what they would normally be used to, or throw a different pitcher out there every inning or something like that. Who knows what they might come up with, but the tanking part is more about rebuilding and trying to develop guys. I don't think tanking's as big an issue as they make it out to be. Again, this is all about people wanting to watch it on TV, and that's about it. Well, none of these things make that big difference if both sides can't come to an agreement and we get to the matter of spring training. So when it does roll around, we'll be able to talk much more about that. For now, it sort of remains in the ether, waiting for things to get settled in Major League Baseball. Let's turn now to some things closer to home. Sit back, relax, prepare yourself for another helping of waffles, syrup optional. After this brief commercial break, I'll be back with my interview for this week, John Millea, media specialist for the Minnesota State High School League. Stick around. There's enough bad news in the world. Where can you turn for some good news? The NRHEG Star Eagle, of course. Your area newspaper, the Star Eagle, focuses on the events and people that make our area a great place to live. The NRHEG Star Eagle, your good news newspaper. To subscribe or advertise, contact Eli at 507-463-8112 or email Steagle, STEAGLE, at hickorytech.net. That's 507-463-8112 or Steagle at hickorytech.net. The Star Eagle is currently hiring for all positions, so you can contact them if you're interested in that as well. And of course, if you subscribe to the NRHEG Star Eagle, you also get to read the original Whatever Flips Your Waffle weekly by yours truly. We're here today with John Millea. He's with the Minnesota State High School League, media specialist for the Minnesota State High School League. Everything that has to do with high school activities, he has a part of that. He reports on that. John's Journal every week at MSHSL.org. He does a podcast, talknorth.com/John Millea, and that's JOHNMILLEA. John, welcome. Thanks for being on the program.
Mark, it's great to talk to you. Anytime I can hang out with somebody from New Richland or that part of Minnesota, I'm having a good day.
We know things are exciting and interesting when John Millea's in the area to do a story. You did one earlier this year on Sydney Schultz and her dad, John,
Yep.
Kind of the relationship as coach and daughter, and he drives the bus, and he's a retired teacher and everything. And that was really, really exciting. Kids get really excited about stuff like that.
Yeah, that was fun. John's one of my favorite people.
Yeah, the two-time state champion basketball coach in the Carly Wagner era, and really fantastic. It's. I know Coach Annika Peterson is so happy to have him on the staff, and that helps the kids get better.
Yeah, Annika's great too. I've gotten to know her over the years, and they were playing at Blooming Prairie the night I went to a game, and to add another cherry to the Sunday, I got to sit in the stands with Dan Stork and watch the game.
Oh, there you go.
With Dan, hadn't seen him in a while. So yeah, it was great.
Our activity director here. Yeah. That's we're fortunate we have some really fantastic people here in the Richland, Heartland, Ellendale, Geneva school district, and helping our kids achieve those levels of success. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm a small town guy from a little town in Iowa. Maybe there's people listening who've heard of Grettinger, Iowa. That's my hometown. It's
Grettinger.
South of Fairmont and Jackson, about 40 miles. So
okay.
I didn't grow up in Minnesota, but I grew up close enough to know how awesome Minnesota was.
Yeah, we'll count you as one of our own, that is.
Yeah, I've only been here 31 years. Yeah. I'll never be a true Minnesotan, but I'm trying.
Yeah, well, we'll take you in. So, John, tell us a little bit about how you came to be in your position as the media specialist of the Minnesota State High School League.
Yeah, Mark, I've been doing this job. It'll be 12 months in March here.
12 months or 12 years?
12 years.
There you go.
12 years. Boy, it seems like 12 months. Time flies. Yeah, 12 years. And if you had told me 13 years ago I'd be doing something like this, I wouldn't know what you're talking about, because I was a newspaper guy. You know, I grew up reading newspapers and worked at newspapers in Iowa, in Des Moines, Cedar Rapids, and Ottumwa. You know, always in sports. Spent 6 years in Phoenix working at the Arizona Republic down there. Then got hired at the Star Tribune up here in Minneapolis, was there in the sports department. for darn near 20 years, a few months short of 20 years. And then this thing at the high school league was created, and Dave Stead, the now retired executive director, was really ahead of the pack on this. His thought was, why does the Minnesota State High School League need to rely on the so-called traditional media to tell stories about what's going on with high school sports and activities? So he created this position of media specialist, and at the time, the newspaper business was really hitting rock bottom, especially the Star Tribune. I mean, it was not good. There were layoffs and buyouts, and pay and benefits were getting cut. It was really ugly, and I was very fortunate. I wasn't looking to leave because newspapers, that's the only thing I ever knew how to do. But I had been covering the Minnesota State High School League at the paper. I knew everybody there. I knew all the tournaments. And I talked to Dave about this and ended up applying for it and ended up getting hired. And until this came along, I'd never dreamed I'd do anything except work at a newspaper.
Yeah.
That's what I'd done. Since I could learn to read, I'd been reading newspapers, and that was my dream. My life was working for a newspaper, and now I'm basically doing the same work. It's just nothing's printed. Everything's online, and with social media, exploding. That's a big part of this with Twitter and Facebook, and so I basically do what I did in my newspaper life. I run around. I mean, Minnesota's a big state because I've driven all over it,
right.
and it's really fun. That's the best thing about it for me, is the fun. I spent years covering all the pro sports teams in the Twin Cities, and that's kind of where the glamour is, and you travel around the country, and I did all that and interviewed, Kobe and Shaq and Michael Jordan, and name a big athlete, I probably was in there somewhere, but then I came back to doing high school sports at the paper and kind of established this relationship with the high school league and high school sports and activities, and this job was almost a no-brainer. I just kind of thought this is really exciting, and at the time, no state governing body in the country, in any state, had anybody doing this kind of a job.
Okay.
And now in the 12 years since, a lot of states have created jobs like this, and in most cases, it's someone, a newspaper person or a TV, radio person with experience in high school sports hired in these places. And I know a lot of these folks around the country, and everybody does it a little different. Everybody kind of has their own way to do things, and I'm still kind of figuring things out. It's only been 12 years.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to figure things out, but it sure is fun, Mark. That's the best thing about it. I'll go to a place like New Richland. I know people there. I was in Roseau for a hockey game in January. I know people in Roseau. Just about any of these places, I have friends just through this job. So it's really been phenomenal.
Yeah. Well, you say you're on that learning curve yet, but social media continues to grow and evolve all the time. So it's ongoing. It's never going to stop changing.
No, and I rely on Twitter and Facebook mostly, but we have an Instagram account at the high school league. We have a TikTok account, which we really don't use much. We have a Pinterest account. I just created a Pinterest account under the MSHSL banner years ago. I thought, well, maybe someday that'll be a big thing. And, we've got all those if we want to use them. But there's, I'm 63 years old. I'm not going to be using TikTok and Pinterest very much. But I know some young people who kind of help us out sometimes at state tournaments. I'll give them the keys to the Instagram account, the TikTok, and say, go ahead, do your best. And they do. It's awesome.
Yeah, and someday those are the people who might inhabit the position you do now, or something that grows out of that too. So
you never know. Yeah, I'm glad to learn all I can as long as I'm doing this. You bet.
Right. Absolutely. So what you've experienced it all when it comes to different levels of sports. But what makes high school sports such a different experience, both for the players and the fans, compared to like college and pro sports?
Yeah, especially with pro sports, everything's about the money. It's a business from top to bottom, left to right. You got players, making a lot of money. You got coaches and front office people, general managers. They're very highly paid, and they should be. But the money, it's a business. That's the thing I saw over and over. I met lots of great professional athletes, down to earth people. We'd have kids the same age. We compare notes. How's your daughter doing in preschool?
Yeah.
and really made some good friends there. But it is a business, and it's a cutthroat business. But then you walk into a high school gym or a football stadium or a hockey game, and it's fun. It's for fun. That's the way. Nobody's making money coaching. You know, they do it because they love it. Officials on the high school level, you know, they make some money, but they're doing it mainly because they love to do it. They want to help the kids out. They want these games to be played. And that's the thing. It's just fun. You know, I walk into a gym or a game and I hear the band and people are excited and the concession stand's busy. It's just so much fun. And I'll never, even if I do retire someday, I'm still going to go to high school games just for that. And that never gets old with me. I never get tired of that. It's just such a neat atmosphere.
Yep. Yeah. I'm on board. One of the things I want to be able to do with this show eventually is really highlight high schoolers a little bit more and show people this is where it starts. You know, all your favorite people you watch on TV, but they were here at one time and they were in those gyms and on those fields and everything else. And it is, I'll tell people all the time, this is the best entertainment for your dollar to come to a high school game.
No question about it. It's, you know, and the state tournaments are awesome. You know, the Minnesota boys high school hockey state tournament's one of the big high school events in the country, rightfully so. But I feel the same way walking into the XL Center as I do walking into the gym in New Richland. It's just a blast.
Yeah.
Well, you know, where else would you want to be?
Right. Well, I'm on board. I spend a lot of nights in gyms around here and on fields at different times. And same as you. When I retire someday, it's not like I'm disappearing. I'll be in the gym. Yeah. So you mentioned the hockey state tournament, and you know the winter activities, the state tournaments, they're coming up, and you're going to be a busy guy. Yep. You are nonstop. Those that follow you on Twitter, and I'm one of them, knows, boy, you can go there and John's going to keep you updated. Here are the scores, and here's what's going on, and you're, I don't know how you do it. You're running all over, and at least it's a little more confined area. You're in the Twin Cities. You go back and forth among some of those. But talk about the experience of a state tournament. What excites you about that, and especially as really you're an unbiased observer. Like you don't care who wins, compared to, of course, the fans of the teams. They really want they're pulling for the team. But what is it just for the average person who can go and enjoy those tournaments?
Yeah, it's really fun, and you're right. I don't care who wins, and you know, and I'm an old sports writer. I'm cheering for the story.
Yeah.
I want at the end of the game, I want there to be a great story, and I try to go behind the scenes a lot in this job. I'm not writing the typical game stories. You know, here's the crucial point in the game, and you know the game flow. I'm not really doing that very much, but and like I said earlier, I know so many people around the state, and I'll get tips from people. Hey, this team just qualified for state. Here's a cool thing behind the scenes you might want to keep an eye on, and that's always fun. Occasionally, I'll talk to a coach, and I'll just kind of politely ask, can I be in your locker room before the game and at halftime? Because cool things happen back there that nobody gets to see. But, yeah, I just think, you know, these state tournaments here, we're really lucky in Minnesota because we have these professional venues for a lot of these state tournaments. You know, like we're going to hit the boys and girls basketballs. I think it's going to be strictly Williams Arena and the Pavilion, although I think the boys are getting into the Target Center for one day of state quarterfinals.
Okay.
But there's some conflicts there. Normally the boys would be basically at Target Center this winter. Boys and girls basketball mostly at Williams and the Pavilion. You know, we use U.S. Bank Stadium for football and soccer, Target Center for dance, and basketball most years, Target Field for baseball, and the XL Center for wrestling and hockey and volleyball. And I always tell people we take that for granted here, and we really shouldn't, because I know what goes on in other states. I follow all these other states on social media, their governing bodies. You know, they're using, in some cases, high school gyms for state tournaments, or maybe, you know, Division II, Division III facilities, and we're really spoiled here, and I think we lose track of that sometimes, how great that is, and it's not cheap.
No.
In most cases, the high school league spends a lot of money to rent those places, and in most cases, the facilities get a piece of every ticket that's sold. You know, U.S. Bank Stadium, we don't have to pay to use because when it was built, because of good people at the legislature, the language, you know, to make that building happen, said the high school league can use it for X number of days every year.
Awesome.
at no cost. And that's phenomenal. That saves hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, Yeah, but I don't, if you're going, like I'm going to be at the One Act Play State Festival. That's later this week over in St. Paul at St. Catherine's University. I'm going to be there at least one of the 2 days. That's not high on the radar for most people if you don't have kids involved in One Act Play, but that's really fun because it's not a sporting event, it's a theater event, and
yes.
I was in high school plays and when I was a kid, and it was fun, but I don't know that much about it. But it's kids working hard. It's a team effort, doing their best. They've made it to state, and they're gonna perform. It's to me that's like any other athletic state tournament. But you just walk into any of these places, and especially these big arenas, and the bright lights. I talk to so many, say basketball players who I'll talk to them after, or even coaches after the first time they have a game at Williams Arena or Target Center, and the lights are so bright. I hear that over and over. Even volleyball at XL. So, geez, the lights are so bright in here.
Yeah.
Because it is different. It is quite a bit different.
Yeah.
And you'll get that deer in the headlights look sometimes for a team that hasn't been there before. But just walking in and the bands are playing. And I was talking to somebody the other day who has young sons, elementary age, and wants to take them to a hockey game for the first time. So he was asking me, should I take him to a Wild game, a Gophers game, or the high school hockey tournament? And I said, well, if you want bells and whistles, the high school tournaments are not like the professional games. You take them to a Wild game, there are tons of bells and whistles. There's things happening every time there's a stoppage or a timeout. There's a lot happening. It's not necessarily the same with high school. He said with my kids' attention spans, I think I'm going for the bells and whistles.
Yeah, right.
They maybe wouldn't be as interested in the game, but at the high school tournaments, when your team is there, it's a huge deal. And I know, how big that is. When I was a senior in high school, my football team played in a state championship game down in Iowa at the University of Northern Iowa at the then brand new Unidome. This was in the 70s. The Unidome is an old place now, but we'd never ever set foot on artificial turf till we got to the state championship game, and we didn't win it, but we had a blast doing it. So I know what it's like, for these kids and these communities to get to state. It's a huge thing, and I just hope everybody has as much fun as they can every time that happens.
Right. You mentioned the One Act Play, and I'll tell you how biased I am because I have a son that performs in One Act at our school. And so, people think of the Minnesota State High School League, and they think sports.
Yeah.
And you bring recognition to One Act, speech, other things like this that are non-sports. Talk a little bit about the importance of those activities and how they benefit the students and those schools, too.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, I think, events like that, speech, One Act Play, debate, the band, the choir stuff, which is all under the high school league's umbrella. That's maybe the most important thing any student can do outside of the classroom, because you talk about doing things that are going to set you up later in life. If you can perform in front of people, if you can do speeches, One Act Play stuff, debate. Oh my goodness, I watch these high school debaters, and it's like I'm going to work for you guys someday. It just amazes me. And I didn't do a lot. I was in choir and some plays in high school. A very small school. There weren't tons of opportunities, but yeah, those are important. And it's different in Minnesota. In not every state, but in the majority of states, the governing body, whatever it is, the Virginia, High School League or the Nebraska State Association, they just do sports. That's their thing. And there are other groups like the fine arts teachers have a group. They run their One Act Play or whatever they do. The speech teachers, they run their state speech tournament. So it's different here, and I don't know the whole history of that. We've been doing at the high school league, we've been doing all these arts activities for as long as I can remember, and I've been here 30 plus years. So, yeah, we really take a lot of pride in that, and it's different than the sporting events. It's not the big crowds. It doesn't get all the attention, but like you said, I think for the kids, it's just so important to give them these opportunities, and I take a lot of pride in going to as many of those events as I can, and tweeting about them with some photos and maybe writing some stories, because those kids are working as hard as any kid on the wrestling mat or the basketball team or anywhere else.
Right, yeah. So you spend a lot of time on the road in your Toyota, if I can throw that little
you bet.
Add in there.
Toyota Camry.
Yep, there you go. And decorated up. If you see it
if you've never seen John's Camry, you'll recognize it pretty quickly. It's pretty decorated.
It stands out. Yes,
yeah.
It stands out.
You had mentioned like at tournaments and stuff, you get some inside info sometimes. Hey, check this out. Is that how you decide where to go? You kind of feel out some stories. People let you know about some cool things going on.
Yeah, I'm not smart enough to know everything that's happening, so I get a lot of emails and direct messages on Twitter. This week, I'm going to go see a boys hockey team that has a female goaltender.
Oh, okay.
And, that's pretty rare.
Mm-hmm.
So I got an email from somebody last week. It's a school up north. I'm going to go watch them play, and I've already talked to the coach about the situation, and it's a pretty cool deal. But yeah, people let me know what's happening. People I don't even know in most cases. I'll just get an email from somebody I've never met, but they know what I do and the kind of stories I like to do, and they'll let me know about something, and I always get back to them saying thanks. I'll try to be there if I can, and yeah, that's the really cool thing about this. Like I talked about the relationships I've developed with people all over the state, and it's even with people I don't know who maybe follow on Twitter or read the stories on John's Journal at the High School League website. They say, hey, there's a guy who maybe he'll write about this. Maybe he'll be interested, and in almost every case I am.
Yeah. So of all, I don't even know how many school districts we have in the state of Minnesota, but like what percentage or how many do you figure you've seen at least once? You've seen these schools.
Yeah, that's a good question. The number of schools is kind of murky because schools merge and
right.
There are all these charter schools coming and going. The number we use at the High School League is approximately 500 school districts, and I think maybe about 400 of them, maybe a little more, would have what you'd call, full activities lists. So I don't know. I've got a map in my office at the High School League. I'm not there today, but a big map of the state of Minnesota, a big highway map on the back of my door. And for a few years, I'd take my yellow marker and kind of trace the roads I'd been on, the towns I'd been to, and for some reason I just got lazy and I stopped doing that. Plus the map was covered in yellow.
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I've never. I could conceivably. Maybe this is the summertime project. Just go through the list of schools. We've got them alphabetically on our website, and just compile a list of how many I've been to. I don't even know what that number would be.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases, I maybe haven't been to a school, but I've seen their teams play either on the road or in a section or state tournament. So,
right.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I don't have an answer to that one, Mark.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm sure there's some that I can think off the top of my head 3 different stories that have involved our school district here.
Sure.
Anywhere that strikes you as you've seen a particular school or group a lot of times, just because somehow stories keep coming out of there?
Well, as you said those words, I thought of Bob McDonald, the late boys basketball coach up in Chisholm. Who's won more basketball games than any coach. I spent a lot of time in that gym in Chisholm, and just kind of spent time with Bob in his later years coaching. He brought teams to state a couple times. We got to know him very well. So I've been in that gym in Chisholm a lot, a couple times since his passing. Once when they named the gym in his honor, or named the court Bob McDonald Court. They had a nice ceremony in the summertime. And I know all his kids who went on to become coaches. Now I know his grandkids who are high school basketball coaches.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of embedded with the McDonald family.
Right. Yeah.
Just recently now in the fall, I did a story in North Branch. I went to their homecoming football game with Grand Rapids, and without really any kind of a story in mind. But I always tell young people interested in journalism, half the battle is just showing up. Because, and I stumbled into a couple of cool things and wrote about it. And then last week ended up writing about the North Branch boys basketball team. They went from 2 wins last year. They won 14 or 15 already this year with a new coach who's got an interesting background. And so North Branch has been on my list here a little bit this school year. Yeah, but New Richland, when Carly Wagner, I just remember we were starting to hear about this little kid from New Richland who was just lighting up the basketball court.
Yep.
And I think the first time I came down there for a game she was a junior.
Yeah,
and
sounds right.
I got there early, and I talked to Dan Stork and John, and I said, hey, can I get a little quiet time with her, like during the JV game or whenever, just to do a little interview. So we were kind of off in a corner, and we were chatting, and they'd gone to state the previous year, I believe. And
yes.
I said, and by now, she had blown up. By her junior year, Carly was well known all over the state.
Yes.
And I'll never forget it. We're chatting, and she was super nice, and we've chatted on and off over the years, even after she was done playing basketball. But I said, what's changed in the last year? What's different in your life? Because now she was this celebrity. And she kind of thought about it, and she smiled, and I think her quote was, well, I have a lot more friends on Facebook than I used to. And it was just the sweetest, most innocent, answer from a high school kid. And it was great fun watching those teams. And kind of end this year, when I watched the girls' team play at Blooming Prairie, another added bonus, I'd never been in the gym in Blooming Prairie, which was nice. Whenever you can say, I've been to the home of the Awesome Blossoms, that's a feather in your cap. Yeah. But just watching the team play again just kind of brought back a lot of those memories of being in the gym in New Richland and hearing the band play, and the place is just absolutely packed for those great teams. And I could probably talk about different places around the state like that I've been to multiple times and just had so much fun.
Of course. And the Awesome Blossoms, of course, the runners-up in your mascot tournament that you had during the pandemic.
That's right. Yeah, we filled some time during the pandemic, with the year we didn't have any spring sports, and then we were getting to the summer, and we didn't know what fall would hold, and I just kind of had this lame-brained idea. Has anybody ever done a 60-14 bracket of nicknames? And I did a little research. I couldn't find anything like that, and basically went through the list of nicknames, came up with 64, and we started voting on Twitter, and it was really fun. I went way beyond anything I'd ever guessed. The hundreds of thousands of votes all the way through the bracket, and then the exciting finals when the Moorhead Spuds rallied to knock off the Awesome Blossoms.
Yeah, it came right to
state champion.
It was less than 1%, wasn't it? Like 50 point something.
It was like 50 point something to 49 point something with tens of thousands of votes cast.
Yeah.
So then I had the bracket blown up and framed, and I ended up going to a football game in Moorhead that fall, and we had a little halftime presentation. I gave the bracket to Spuddy the Spud, their mascot. Yeah. It's hanging in the school somewhere now, I think. So that stuff's really fun.
Right. You have dined at hundreds of concession stands, right, over the years.
Sure have.
What never gets old when it comes to game food at a concession stand?
Well, the whole pretzel and cheese thing just took on a life of its own. And that started like most things I do. It's just dumb. It's just doing something dumb on Twitter, trying to have fun. I was at the XL Center. I don't know if it was volleyball or wrestling or hockey, and I was just I needed a snack. I go from the press box down to the concession stand. Oh, there's an overpriced pretzel with cheese. I'm going to spend $6 on that. And I took a picture of it before I took a bite and posed the question, is there enough cheese in that plastic cup to get through this pretzel? And then I took a picture when I was, almost done with the pretzel. The cheese is long gone. And I said, this is a, epic failure or something like that.
Yeah, right.
And then people started taking pictures of their own pretzels and cheese at games they were at and sending them to me. So I've continued that, although with COVID and everything, the concession stands, have been different. We're almost back to normal now, but
yes.
They weren't doing some of those things. But if I get a good hot dog, not a grocery store hot dog, something from the local meat shop, those are awesome. And I think my number one item I've ever had at a concession stand at Buffalo High School, one year at a football game, I had a bison burger.
Okay.
And I thought, is this bison? Because it's really fantastic. And the ladies at the concession stand, the moms are kind of disappointed. They'll be, no, it's just regular beef.
Oh.
But it was really good. I put a slice of cheese on there. It's grilled right there. And for a couple of years, I had my running list of my top 5 concession items. And for 2 years in a row, the bison burger at Buffalo was the winner. And I haven't done that since, and mostly because of COVID. A lot of places were just selling prepackaged food,
Right. Right.
Yeah, there's a million ways to have fun at high school sporting events. That's kind of the moral of that story.
Yep.
It's not just what happens on the field, on the court. There's a lot going on, and that's just another beautiful thing about high school activities.
Yeah, I thought of that because I'm at all of our winter activities here, and I've eaten more pulled pork this winter than I.
There you go.
And if there's anything that's fine to eat over and over again, pulled pork is one of those things, and they'll put it on top of nachos for you, and they'll do all that kind of stuff too. And the nights I'm daring, I'll throw some jalapenos on top, and
there you go.
We'll go from there.
Yeah, you can't beat that. No,
yeah.
I've had my share of pulled pork too.
Yeah, that and popcorn. Got to have popcorn at every
Yep.
sporting event, and that's very, very important. You talked a little bit about Coach McDonald and some of that. Other stories that stand out to you as being particularly special, ones that stick with you over the years?
Yeah, I've written over the years multiple times about kids who really overcame adversity just to be participants. And I don't want to lump them all into one category, but the ones that really have stuck with me are, there was a football player at Stephen Argyle when they had their great state championship run, 76 wins in a row, I think. And one of their football players, one of their two-way linemen who also played basketball, when he was 3 years old, he fell off a tractor on the farm and had one leg cut off at the knee. So he had a prosthetic leg.
Okay.
And he played football and basketball. And the day before one of those prep bowls, I met him and his family at Shriners Hospital in Minneapolis. And he was visiting the shop where they build prosthetics because he was still growing, and he was getting fitted for a new leg. And it was just so neat to be in there and watch these professionals creating these things. And he knew this guy who'd worked with him for his whole life creating prosthetics. And so this kid's walking out of there. He's got his new fake leg under his arm, and the guy in the shop who builds all his prosthetics said something like, "Now if your prosthetic comes off during the game, just slap that other one on," and they laughed about it. And there was a three-sport athlete, I think it was at Onamia or Malacca, somewhere up there, and I caught him at a baseball game. He was originally from China. He'd been adopted, but he was born with one arm. And he was a basketball player, a receiver on the football team, and the catcher on the baseball team.
Wow.
How do you do that with one arm? He'd catch the ball, then flip the glove and the ball in the air, grab the ball with his one hand, throw it back to the pitcher, or throw out base stealers. Batted one-handed, and everybody'd known him his whole life. It wasn't any big deal.
Right.
But that's just how he did it. Just a tremendous young man, tremendous family, great athlete. And then there was a girl from McRae out in western Minnesota who I'd heard about, born with basically one good leg and had a prosthetic. And I found out about her before her senior golf season. And her dream was she'd been to state already. She was a good golfer. And her dream as a senior was to win a medal. So I'd gone out there during the golf season and interviewed her and took some pictures and wrote about her. And sure enough, she made it through the sections and qualified for state, and the results are coming in, and we're up there at the 1A state golf tournament in Becker, and I'm standing with her mom as the results are coming in, and the guy from our office running the tournament is looking at the scorecards before they're posting them, and he kind of motions me over and he whispers in my ear, "She's getting a medal."
Wow.
And I whispered that to her mom. The girl didn't know till everything was announced, and her mom took a picture of me with her daughter with the medal around her neck. She was 6th or 7th or 8th, I don't know. Biggest smile, and I've got that picture framed in my office. And again, we keep in touch on Twitter. I'll see her occasionally if our cross paths. So those relationships with these really special kids who do great things, that's really important to me.
Right. Fantastic. Well, if you have not read some of John's work on John's journal at MSHSL.org, you need to check that out. You can follow John on Twitter. He's also got a podcast, TalkNorth.com. And it's really, if you enjoy high school sports, if you have ever enjoyed high school sports, it's a wonderful thing to get back into. John, thank you so much. John Millea of the Minnesota State High School League Media Specialist, thanks for joining us this week for this interview.
Great, Mark. Thanks for giving me the call. Love chatting with you. Let's do it again sometime.
Absolutely. John Millea of the Minnesota State High School League.
If you're looking for a high-quality used car or truck at a reasonable price, Car Time of Owatonna is a must-stop for you. Justin and Jason will work hard for you to put you behind the wheel of a great vehicle. It's getting increasingly more difficult to find good used vehicles these days, but the guys at Car Time put in extra time to locate what you need. You won't find a better price or a cleaner vehicle than the ones that you can find at Car Time. So swing on over to Car Time of Owatonna, located a quarter mile east of I-35 on Highway 45. Check out their inventory online at cartimeofowatonna.com. That's cartimeofowatonna.com. Drive on over and drive away happy. And now it's time for the state of Minnesota sports. Not much to report on the Twins, as we talked earlier about kind of where Major League Baseball is and some of the potential changes that could affect the Twins in different ways. Certainly, especially the designated hitter rule across both National and American League, as we mentioned, that might keep the Twins out of the running for some guys that swing a big bat but don't field quite as well anymore. But again, I think the Twins are going to stick with more of a rotating designated hitter, not just somebody who that's their sole job like Nelson Cruz had. Unless something falls into their lap, if Cruz says, hey, I want to come back there, certainly they should probably consider doing that. When we look at the University of Minnesota, and we look at our Golden Gopher basketball teams right now, some ups and downs. The men lost a disappointing game at Nebraska, the last place team in the Big Ten, but then came back home, came from behind, beat Penn State at home in a kind of rough and tumble game, but taking advantage of what they could do. The women, too, that up and down momentum of, we get something going and then we run across a really good team and they show why they're a really good team. I think both teams are the type of team, however, that when you get to the Big Ten tournament, I don't know if anybody really wants to play them. They're the type that can come out and on any given night beat any team in the league. The scrappiness, everything else that goes with it could really make things difficult. And so, I give them opportunities, especially the early rounds of the Big Ten tournament where there's the buys and the double buys for some people. And we'll see what kind of happens there. But, if I'm the Gopher men right now, I was thinking about this just today. If I'm the Gopher men, I'm thinking about, hey, we're over 500, and can we do enough to kind of stay above that watermark and have a chance to play in the NIT tournament this year? Again, if you go back to the beginning of the season, what Ben Johnson, the hand he was dealt, a lot of leftovers, a lot of people who nobody else wanted. And if you would have said, hey, you have a chance to play postseason basketball. It's the NIT, not as big a deal, but in your first season, without very much in the cupboard, you have a chance to play that. I think any Gopher fan would say, hey, that'd be an outstanding season. And they started off so hot. And again, still a chance to do that. And that goes a long way for the Gophers, again, showcasing Ben Johnson's talent and ability as a coach to get the most out of his players. And if you are thinking about coming to the University of Minnesota and you have somebody like him sitting there who's going to get the most out of you, that could sway your decision to want to be a Golden Gopher basketball player. We're going to get more into the women Gophers next week. Our guest is going to be Carly Wagner, former Golden Gopher, will be on the show next week. Got an interview lined up with her. That'll be very exciting. And we'll talk about the state of women's basketball at the University of Minnesota, as well as a few other things. We look at our other winter professional sports between the Wild and the Timberwolves. Not a lot of movement from a week ago. Again, teams sort of solidifying. The Timberwolves are sitting here looking at the NBA All-Star break coming up this weekend and kind of assessing what happens. The trade deadline came and went for them. No movement from the Timberwolves. And as some people have written and talked about, that's probably a good thing. They're going to at least be in the play-in tournament, it looks like, barring a huge collapse here at the end of the season. But let's be honest, they're not going to go anywhere. They're not going to be sitting here in the Western Conference Finals or the NBA Championship. That's not going to happen. So you look at what you have and you say, hey, we think we have something good here. We think we have the basis. And if we add some key parts in the offseason, we can rise. Again, the next step is, can we get into the upper half of the Western Conference? Could we have a home series where we have more home games. We're in the top 4. What do we need to do to get there? And an important step they made this past week was extending Patrick Beverley, adding 1 more year onto his contract, which was due to expire at the end of the season. And by all accounts, Patrick Beverley is one of those defensive players that are kind of crucial. And weird stats when you look at the Timberwolves since January 1st, they've been just this offensive juggernaut, but their defense has tanked, is among the worst in the league. And earlier in the season, they were a very good defensive team, and their offense, they couldn't, throw the ball in the ocean from a boat floating in the middle of it. And now it's kind of reversed, and yet they're still finding ways to win games. And you want a Patrick Beverley who can go out there and guard somebody and shut them down a little bit when he needs to. And so to extend him 1 more year, he's in his early mid-30s by the time he gets done with this next year of his contract. That's, again, showing the Timberwolves really believe in what they have right now and are building toward that possibility in the next year or two to really make some waves in the Western Conference. So to not make a trade, not that big a deal. Wild, they've had some big wins. One that stands out, and I was talking to one of the hosts of another show here on 365 Sportscast, deals with the Carolina Hurricanes and their hockey team, and a big win by the Wild to beat the Hurricanes, who are one of the top contenders for the Stanley Cup. And again, as little as I know about hockey, I know that's a pretty big deal when you stand up and do that. So that bodes well for the Wild as they continue kind of moving ahead here through a difficult stretch of playing about every other day. And finally, the Vikings, they will be announcing on Thursday their new head coach, Kevin O'Connell. That's the plan. Of course, weird things can happen, and scuttlebutt the possibility of Sean McVay hanging it up all of a sudden and saying, no, I'm done. And then O'Connell saying, oh, wait, maybe I can be the head coach here. Vikings fans just sort of expect the worst at this point. But it sure looks like Thursday will be the big day, and Kevin O'Connell will be the new head coach of the Minnesota Vikings. And when you come off a Super Bowl win, now you bring with you all the intangibles that go along with that. And so hopefully Vikings fans are excited about this, and we'll kind of see what's going to happen. And moving forward, some of the assistant coaches have been hired now, and we're moving toward that really exciting part of the offseason, free agents, trades, and the draft. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the state of Minnesota sports. And now it's time for This Week in Minnesota Sports History. Some sparseness in what I have for you this week, but let's start with February 16th. In 1973, Twins shortstop Danny Thompson was found to have chronic leukemia. He continued to play through 1976, but died in December of that year. And in 2005, on February 16th, Gary Bettman called off the NHL season due to a labor dispute, putting an end to hockey games. February 17th, in Minnesota sports history, in 2021, the Twins announced that coach Mike Bell would miss spring training due to recent surgery for kidney cancer. He would later go on to die at the end of March last year. February 18th, in 2018, the Twins traded for Jake Odorizzi from the Tampa Bay Rays for a minor leaguer. Odorizzi did fairly well while he was here. Basically a number 3 starter, kind of what you would expect out of him. February 19th, in Minnesota sports history, in 1985, the Twins sent Randy Johnson, not that Randy Johnson, and Ron Shear to the White Sox for Roy Smalley. It was nice to get Roy back in a Twins uniform. He got a World Series ring for the Twins in 1987 and continues to do broadcasting duties for the Twins as well. February 20th, in 1987, the Twins traded Mike Shade to the Expos for Al Newman. Al Newman, super utility guy for the Twins, always able to fill in the infield wherever he was needed in that World Series year, also in 1991. In 2001, on February 20th, former Twins manager Bill Rigney passed away. He was manager back for the 1970 American League West champion Twins, who got knocked out of the playoffs then by the Baltimore Orioles. February 21st, in 1961, a prodigious day, the Minnesota Twins opened their first training camp at Tinker Field in Orlando, Florida. Long since shuttered, of course. They're now at Fort Myers, whenever that'll start up this year. And in 2019, on February 22nd, Major League Baseball announced trying out a pitch timer in spring training games, a 20-second pitch timer. Boy, it'd sure be nice if that became part of it. It would speed things up a little bit and perhaps keep people a little more interested in baseball. For local listeners, this week in Richland, Heartland, Ellendale, Geneva sports, February 17th starts the section wrestling tournament. Good luck to our wrestling team as they try to make a dent in a very tough section. February 18th is a huge night. Boys basketball is on the road at Waterville Elysian Morristown, but the bigger game is the girls basketball game at home against Waterville Elysian Morristown. It's basically this: whichever team wins that night will host the inaugural Gopher Conference Championship game the following night on Saturday at 7 o'clock. The Buccaneers trail the Panthers by 1 game in their division, but if they win, they will have beaten the Panther ladies twice and would win that tiebreaker. If our hometown girls win, then they will host that conference championship on Saturday at 7 o'clock against the Hayfield Vikings, a team that they took to overtime and who are currently undefeated on the season. February 21st, boys basketball is finally back at home. They'll play Janesville, Waldorf, Pemberton. And February 22nd, the boys hit the road again to go to Waseca, and the girls will finish up their regular season with a home game against the Waseca Blue Jays. Remember, if you can't attend games in person, we certainly invite you to join in the NFHS network. I will provide play-by-play on the network as I announce in the gym. It's a good time, and it's a good way to support our local athletes. Well, that will do it for yet another helping of waffles here at 365sportscast.com. I'm glad you decided to spend another hour with me. Hope you'll continue to tune in each week right here at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central. Remember, if you have some ideas and you want to be part of this process and help chart the course of this ship, email me at waffleflipper22@gmail.com or message me on Twitter at Mr. D1973. Next week, we'll dive back into the world of Minnesota sports. Will Major League Baseball and the players have come any closer to getting back on the field? Will the Minnesota Vikings, with new coach Kevin O'Connell, have started to figure out what it takes to win a Super Bowl? Will the Wild and the Timberwolves move up in the playoff standings? And how about our Gophers? Will they make an impact at the end of the Big Ten season? Come on back and find out. I'll have another special guest to delve into all that and more. Thank you again for joining me. This is Mark Domeyer, signing off with Syrup.